Hi, I'm Rachel from revisewithrachel.com, and today I'm going to be doing an overview of stress. First, I'm just going to go over the different topics that you need to know. Then I'll go through each topic and just give you one key piece of research that I think is really important that you can get your head around. I'm just going to tell you what the research is about, but you also need to come up with a few evaluation points for those pieces of research. There are 7 key topic areas that you need to know about for the stress module, and these are stress as a bodily response, which includes knowing about the pituitary adrenal system, stress-related illness, which is how stress can impact on your immune system, life changes and daily hassles. For example, a life change would be something such as the death of a relative, whereas a daily hassle is something like your partner not washing up. Workplace stress, which is how your work environment and the people at work can affect your stress levels, and also things such as workload and the amount of control you have over your work. Personality factors such as type A and type B personality, the hardy personality and how hostile you are. How people cope with stress, such as whether they cope with it in an emotion-focused way or a problem-focused way. And finally, stress management, which is looking at the different ways you can deal with stress. You can deal with them physiologically or psychologically. A physiological treatment would be some sort of drug, whereas psychological might be a kind of therapy. Okay, so now I'm going to go over each of the topic areas and just explain a little bit about them and give you a key piece of research for some of them where it's relevant. Stress as a bodily response. Now this topic area is all about how the body deals with stress. So I'm just going to go over the pituitary adrenal system. In the environment there's various stressors, and our body perceives these stressors through the hypothalamus. When the hypothalamus is stimulated by a stressor, it releases CRF, which is corticotrophin releasing hormone. When this is released into the body, it stimulates the pituitary gland, which then goes on to secrete ACTH, which is adrenocorticotropic hormone. The release of ACTH stimulates the adrenal cortex, and this causes corticosteroids to be released into the bloodstream. When they're released into the bloodstream, the liver releases energy, and this causes the immune system to be suppressed. And therefore you can see how stressors in the environment lead to the immune system being suppressed through this diagram. You don't need to know the names of the 2 hormones, CRF and ACTH, but it does look really impressive if you can actually write them down in the exam with the full names. So if you have time to remember them, then I'd suggest doing that. And just make sure that you have really got to grips with this diagram, the flow chart, and then you'll be fine for that bit of the module. Stress-related illness. This topic area is all about how stress impacts on the immune system. The key piece of research I would suggest remembering for this topic area would be the Kekol-Glaser study. They did their study on medical students preparing for their final examinations. They took blood samples from the medical students and gave them a questionnaire about negative events in their lives. They did this 1 month before the exam period and during the exam period. The blood samples taken allowed them to measure the natural killer cell activity in the students' bodies, and the questionnaires gave them an indication of how stressed the students were. They found that in high stress conditions, which was during the exam period, there was the greatest reduction in natural killer cell activity. Life changes and daily hassles. A life change is a significant event in our lives that is considered to be stressful, such as the death of a close relative. A daily hassle is only a small stressor, but it is thought because it is occurring so frequently, it can have just as big an impact as a life event. The key piece of research I'm going to give you into life changes is by Holmes and Ray. Their experiment was done in 2 parts. The first part aimed to create a questionnaire which they could give to people to measure the effect of life events on their health and whether they developed any stress-related illnesses. In order to develop the questionnaire, they examined the medical records of 1,000 people and looked at the life events that had occurred before they became ill. They then rated these life events to see which ones caused the most illnesses. Once they'd developed the questionnaire, they gave it to 2,500 naval officers. The questionnaire gave them a total score of how stressful the life events they'd experienced were. This was then correlated with illnesses that the officers had reported on the questionnaires. They found a positive correlation of 0.118. The research into daily hassles is by Anita DeLongers. She gave her 100 participants 4 different questionnaires about hassles, uplifts, life events and health. And the results of her study showed a positive correlation between hassles and health, but no correlations between any of the other things. Therefore, these pieces of research both support that life changes and daily hassles can cause stress-related illnesses. Workplace stress. Key piece of research for this topic area is by Marmot. He examined his participants to see whether they had coronary heart disease, and he also gave them questionnaire about their job. He then graded all the different jobs people did into different categories, with the lowest grades being the lowest paid jobs where people had the least control, and the highest grades where people were paid more money and had more control over their work. He found that both men and women in the lowest grade of job were 3 times more likely to develop coronary heart disease than people in any of the other grades. This research shows that workplace stress therefore can impact on illness, and it is thought that it might be the fact that they don't have very much control over their work that leads to them becoming stressed. Personality factors. There are several different personality factors which can have an impact on your stress level. First, I'm just going to look at type A and B personalities. People with a type A personality are considered to be competitive, ambitious, impatient, hostile, relentless, and pressured, whereas people with a type B personality are seen as more laid back. Therefore, research would suggest that people with a type A personality are more prone to stress-related illnesses. Other personality factors to consider are hardiness and hostility. Hardiness is the type of personality consisting of challenge, commitment, and control. And people with a hostile personality are thought to feel or show dislike to whoever they consider their opposition to be. The key piece of research for personality factors that I'm going to go over was done by Cabasa. He assessed male businessmen executives for their hardiness and for illnesses that they had. And he quite simply found that people with a high hardiness score were more prone to stress-related illnesses. Therefore, the research supports the fact that personality factors can have an impact on how stressed you are. Coping with stress. There are 2 ways in which we can cope with stress. We can cope with it in an emotion-focused way or a problem-focused way. Emotion-focused coping is where efforts are made to reduce negative emotions which are caused by being stressed. These negative emotions can be reduced through things such as denial, where denying that you're stressed or that anything is wrong. The key piece of research into emotion-focused coping was done by Penley et al. They interviewed nursing students to find out how they coped with stress. He found that those that used problem-focused coping generally had better health than those that used emotion-focused coping. Problem-focused coping is where you engage in purposeful activities in order to improve the situation and reduce stress. This might be something such as planning your time better in future so that you don't leave all of your work to the last minute. The key research into this area was done by Park et al. He got undergraduates to describe the most stressful event they had been through. He then asked them about the event's controllability, their daily mood, and how they coped with the event. He found that people who used problem-focused coping had a better daily mood. Therefore, most of the research into this area suggests that problem-focused coping is better than emotion-focused coping because it leads to less stress in the long run. Stress management. There are 2 forms of stress management, and these can be physiological or psychological. Physiological methods of stress management are drugs, and there are 2 main types of drugs used to treat stress, which are beta blockers and benzodiazepines. Beta blockers are often used to help people with high blood pressure, coronary heart disease, and stage fright. They work by stopping the fight and flight response and have a direct effect on the body. Beta blockers are good because they are fast, effective, cheap, and they are not addictive. Benzodiazepines are drugs such as Valium and lithium. These have a direct effect on the brain and work by decreasing serotonin. Decreasing serotonin causes more GABA to be produced in the brain, which is a neurotransmitter which promotes natural anxiety relief. Benzodiazepines are very useful in conjunctions with other therapies. However, they can only be used in the short term because they are highly addictive, and they also produce sedative and depressive side effects. The 2 main methods of psychological stress management are stress inoculation therapy and cognitive behavioural therapy. These are otherwise known as SIT and CBT. Stress inoculation therapy aims to reduce the perceived demands that the person has and improve their coping ability. It is a 3-stage process and works in the following way. The first stage is assessment, where the therapist will break down the stressor into measurable goals. The second step is learning stress reduction techniques. This is where the therapist will teach the patient relaxation exercises which they can use when they're feeling stressed. The third step is the application. This is where the therapist will role play with the person how they're going to use what they've learned in their life. The patient can then go and apply this to stressors in their everyday lives. Cognitive behavioural therapy works by challenging the beliefs of the patient. For example, the therapist will talk to them about why they're feeling stressed and what it is that's worrying them. Often people make themselves feel even more stressed than they need to be because they build up whatever they are stressed about to being the most important thing in their life when really it isn't. Therefore, the job of the therapist in cognitive behavioural therapy is to challenge these beliefs and make the patient look at their problems in a more realistic way and see that the thing that they are stressed about isn't actually as important as they're making it out to be. There are strengths and weaknesses of both physiological and psychological therapies. However, I haven't really got time to go over that in this video, so just make sure that you look for some of those in your textbook. So, there you have it, an overview of stress. The information I've given you in this video is a basic outline of the module with key pieces of research. But please remember that you also need to think of some evaluation points for those pieces of research. And if you're aiming to go for a high grade such as an A or A star in your exams, then I'd recommend finding an additional piece of research for each topic. Anyway, that's all from me, but I'd just like to say good luck with your exams. And if you found this tutorial useful, then please like it, subscribe to my channel, and tell all your friends about my website, which is www.revisewithrachie.com. Bye!